Hi everyone, I am Anonymous Traveler from Intellectual Exercise. Today, I am going to teach you a technique to increase energy within yourself. The core essence of this technique is combining prana with the inner life force called Jing to get a synergy effect. In other words, it combines the outer life force and the inner life force and maximize them. I designed this technique for my subscribers and adjusted the strength level with safety in mind. Whenever I discuss something new or share a new exercise, I have to be careful. The thing is, several years ago, I almost drove one person to madness after I gave him some advice. The result was something that he couldn't handle, and it was a disaster. He was on the verge of becoming schizophrenic. Luckily, after several weeks, he gained back his sanity, but it was really close. So after that incident, I've been very careful about what I say, and I do not give any advice that can be risky. My lecture is about 15 minutes on average, but I spend at least half a day to complete the lecture. Of course, that also has to do with the fact that I always have to record multiple times to get a better pronunciation. Many people complained about my English, so I always record multiple times before posting to make sure the final recording is reasonably understandable. But other thing is, I always have to think about safety issue when I write my lecture. Some advice can be dangerous, and since I talk to multiple people with a different level of development, I have to make sure that what I discuss will not harm anyone. So I have to spend a lot of time to read my original script, to adjust and remove whatever information that has a chance to harm the audience. For example, originally, this lecture has detailed information on the techniques of microcosmic orbit circulation within the body. But I decided to remove that part because it can be dangerous when one has blockage, and I couldn't be sure whether all of you are free from blockage. So instead, I designed this exercise to make sure that it is effective and safe at the same time. By the way, this exercise is focused on men, so my apologies to female subscriber if there is one. According to YouTube data, more than 90% of my audience is men. But if you remove the H.P. Lovecraft audiobooks from YouTube data, it's about 95%. So about 5% of my YouTube lecture audience is women, and very likely there is no female subscriber on my subscribe star webpage. However, if there is one, I apologize that this exercise is focused on men. But I am not an expert on Taoist inner alchemy techniques for women, so I only focused on male perspective. Yes, this exercise is actually using one of the principles from Taoist inner alchemy techniques. Anyway, so I apologize in advance. And let me give you basic background principle about this exercise. First thing is, every form of a living entity experience some form of depletion after expelling reproductive fluid. Yes, ejaculation can bring a nice feeling of relaxation, but still, biologically speaking, expelling reproductive fluid is a form of depletion. And this rule not only applies to animals, but also to plant as well. If you kept plant from going to seed, plants have greater longevity. I know many people consider reducing the frequency of sexual release is a stupid idea, but please hear me out. It's not like I am recommending to give up sexual release altogether. In the northern traditions of Taoist alchemy practice, one needs to give up ejaculation altogether in order to practice. However, what I am sharing is a technique that does not require such drastic measures. You can practice this technique while not giving up sexual release. However, once you are fully aware and utilize the energy generated from this practice, you are free to reduce the frequency of ejaculation in order to maximize your energy. Since our society is completely obsessed with sexual pleasure, I will quote something from the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer in order to bring your attention to the downside of sexual pleasure. Actually, I will summarize Schopenhauer's insight into sex and procreation. According to Schopenhauer's insight, the sexual activities and the procreation is a process of illusion provided by the nature, and it was designed to give you a false illusion of happiness, but in reality, this passion of sex and procreation does not serve you, and it only serves the interest of the nature, which is maintaining its ecosystem by keeping its inhabitant engaged in reproduction endlessly. I know it sounds very harsh, but it is a good insight to think about since we are living in a world obsessed with sexual pleasures. And this issue of frequent expelling of reproductive fluid is related to the life force. Chinese alchemy system called this life force in the reproductive fluid as Jing, and when you release it, the body will restore it, but it takes energy to do so. So, Chinese system studied and developed method to transform this reproductive fluid for inner alchemy. Now, I would like to talk about a very unique species that defies a rule of aging and death. It is Turritopsis dohrnii, also known as immortal jellyfish. This unique jellyfish lives in the Mediterranean Sea and the Japanese Sea. And when it becomes old, it reverses itself to a sexually immature stage of life cycle. It does this through the cell development process of transdifferentiation, which alters the differentiated state of the cells and transform them into new types of cells. In human terms, that is like when a man became a senior citizen, he then suddenly turns back the time and becomes a pre-puberty boy. The interesting point here is the stage of life cycle that old immortal jellyfish is going after is before sexual maturity. And after going back to the early stage of life cycle before sexual maturity, it repeats this process over and over again whenever it becomes old. That is why the scientists call it immortal, because it can reverse old age repeatedly. In other words, it does not even have a maximum lifespan because it can do this process over and over. However, immortal jellyfish can still die, usually by being eaten by other sea creatures or due to disease. But at least in terms of aging process, it can reverse itself to young age by manipulating sexual maturity. The reason why I brought up immortal jellyfish is, although as human we cannot be immortal, but at least we can come up with a strategy to increase life energy by manipulating sexual fluid. This issue of manipulating sexual fluid has been studied and practiced in Chinese alchemy system for a long time. Some claims this practice can reach a point of achieving immortality. But personally, I think it is a great exaggeration. But at least increasing life force is definitely possible. What I am going to share is an exercise that I designed for my subscribers that is the easiest and the safest one to practice. However, in order to use this technique, you also need to use a technique that I taught you before, since it requires combination of them. It is a breathing technique to increase the amount of prana in your body. To those of you who need review, I will share the link and the title of the lecture video on below. The lecture's name is How to Increase Prana Intake. So, first, sit down on a comfortable cushion. slowly adjust your breathing pattern based on my technique explained in that video. This pattern is basically making your exhale longer and withholding breath for a while and let your body absorb prana instead of oxygen as a source of energy. Keep maintaining this breathing pattern and adding more and more prana in your body. Now, visualize this prana in a shape of ball of light. Then, bring down this ball of prana to the root of your penis. Visualize the ball of prana wrapping up your sperm. Remember, this is not an attempt to maximize your sperm count. While doing this, you are strengthening the essential part of sperm, which is the life force, Jing. Do this until you can feel some heat or warm sensation around the area. This will make your libido or sexual urge to increase, but make sure you do not engage in any sexual activities right after this exercise. Now, prepare warm baths and pay attention to the water temperature, and you need to find the most relaxing temperature and stick to it. Then add salt. When it comes to salt, it can be Himalayan pink salt, Epsom salt, Dead Sea salt, etc. You can try different salt and find the best one for you. And make sure you do this salt bath right after Jing strengthening exercise that I described. This is a completion of the exercise. I have to explain why I added warm salt bath to this exercise. Bathing in warm water infused with salt is a great method to help ease stress in our body and mind. And the thing is, when you are advanced, you can use the energized Jing and let it move following the microcosmic orbit in your body. This microcosmic orbit circulation technique is basically a process of letting the energy move up from the base of the spine all the way up to the brain and then move it down through the face, chest, and abdomen to return to where it began to complete one cycle. However, I cannot recommend this unless one is advanced enough. If you have any physical, mental, or energy blockage, this microcosmic orbit circulation technique of Jing can cause severe damage. So instead, I added salt bath, which is basically a very basic technique to weaken the blockage within your body. The Jing energy you generated need to be properly distributed in your body, so instead of forcing it by using this microcosmic orbit circulation technique, I added salt bath in order to promote effective distribution of the Jing. So this is definitely not as powerful as the microcosmic orbit circulation technique of Jing, but very safe and no side effect involved. The core essence of this exercise is combining prana with the inner life force, Jing, to get a synergy effect. In other words, it combines the outer life force and the inner life force and maximize them. So it is still powerful enough. Thanks for listening and all the best.